So tell us, Brett, a little bit about, like your backstory, because obviously, and you're just doing a documentary I saw on this side. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about your story. I'm super excited for you to be sharing this today.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, thanks for having me on the podcast. Really, really happy that that people are interested in my story. Validates, like you said, with the documentary, that people are interested in hearing about it. But yeah, I suppose my story, it does go back a long way. I'm very used to sharing my story because I do it for a living, and I always get stuck with how much backstory you give, like how far back do you go? Because really, my story starts as a result of the incident that changed my life, which was the shark attack.
Yes.
But I can't just start from there, because it's important to know who I was before that point.
Yes.
Because for a large part of my life, a lot of people talk about adversity as being something you face over and over again. For me, the shark attack was really my first big adversity.
Yes.
So before and up until that point, like, life was pretty smooth sailing for me. I'd grown up in a nice family, lived in a great little community in a town called Kiama on the south coast of New South Wales, grew up as a surfer. And for me, life was good. Like, I was really happy in the direction I was going in, and that direction was chasing my dream of becoming a professional surfer.
Yeah.
A dream I'd had since I first stepped on a surfboard when I was 11 years old. And at the time of the shark attack, I'd committed to legitimately chasing my dream. So doing the competitions and trying to qualify for the world tour. So I think that's where my story, it is pretty significant, where it's not just a shark attack that happened to someone, because as a result of that attack, and I know I'm skipping over the large details there, you can ask whatever you'd like around the actual attack itself, but I suppose the outcome from that, and not only the physical damage that I sustained, not only nearly losing my life, but losing 3/4 of my left quad, to being told walking was going to be very difficult for me again, being told I'd never be active and I'd never surf again. That was really what I think started the importance of my story, not just for me personally, but I think the narrative itself. And when you do contrast it with where I was at that point in life, and I know resilience is a big focus point for you personally, and for me, I'd never really had to display resilience before. Like, I'd never been put in that position where I'd had so much taken away from me and needed to try and battle back from that. So for me, that story of resilience wasn't something where I was like, okay, this is what I need to do here. I was really, working it out along the way. And I think for me, there's so much that I learned in that. I was very, very lucky and very fortunate that I had some great help along the way in the people that were around me. Not only that, but I suppose the lucky breaks that I did catch, not only in being able to stay alive, but in being able to keep my leg, and the people that I connected with to help me through that journey were so important. And luck did play a huge part in it. But when I do talk about my overall story and the resilience side of it, which is something that I do try and share with a lot of people, is some people have an idea of what resilience does look like. Some people, I always say, like, people go through stuff every single day. It doesn't have to be a shark attack, really. The things that we go through, they can be small things, but they can add up over time to the point where you can be mentally feeling in the same position that I was, and what led to that point can be completely different. And we'll all have to display some sort of resilience at some point, but the circumstances under which we do are always different. But I think the tools that I learn along the way are some of the most important things that help me not only get through that struggle, but have given me the tools to be able to work through anything from that point forward. So I think when I do really break down my story like that, it is a lot more than just a shark attack, because and that's something that I needed really early on to acknowledge, is that the shark attack side of things is a very unique situation to be. Not only just numerically and the odds of being attacked by a shark, but it's the type of story that you tell where people are always interested in it. And I always ask myself why. People go through these adversities every day, like I said before, and can go through traumas that are unlucky, that are unfair, that are devastating. But for some reason, the shark attack is always the most interesting of those. And I think a big part of it comes down to the fact that, well, for me, I've figured out that a lot of people, well, hopefully most people, are not part of the food chain. Like as human beings, we escaped the food chain a long time ago. And to hear the perspective of someone that was actually part of that is something that we're not used to. And I think the primitive aspect of that is something that people really connect to. And especially when we talk about storytelling in general, that's something that does really relate to our primitive cores. So I did need to acknowledge that early on, that I had a very unique story to tell. And I did want to use that to help other people as I eventually worked through my recovery, getting to be able to walk again, get back a basic, way of life, and then progress onto the other goals of getting back to work, and then eventually getting back in the water and surfing, which the physical recovery is something that took time and took effort. But the mental side of the recovery and trying to find something to help drive me through that was really, when I look back, and they're the biggest lessons that I learned along the way. So yeah, I try and use that perspective to help as many people as I can, not only just in my line of work in the mental health space, but something I hope to do with the documentary. It's what I hope to do by doing podcasts and interviews and things like that, because I do acknowledge that it's a unique story that I have, and I think I do have it for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, because I'd like to go back to that day, because obviously how sometimes people might wake up one day and they go, oh, they had a weird gut feeling that day that something was going to happen. Was it anything like that, or you just sort of it was just a normal day for you? And just to explain a little bit about the attack, and then I sort of want to ask some questions in regards to emotionally as well, how you dealt with it afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, the gut feeling side of things is funny. When I reflect on the day, and that actual day for me started at 2 a.m. in the morning. I had a phone call from my boss. I was working in a surf shop at the time, and he called me to tell me that the shop had been broken into at 2 a.m. So that's really how my day started. And if you believe in bad omens, then that's probably, a pretty key one right there, that, maybe you should just tuck yourself back in bed and worry about it tomorrow. But I was just going through my day like normal. Dealt with the break-in. It was actually the second time the shop had been broken into, so I kind of knew what to do. Went there, talked to police officers, cleaned up the shop, got the front window replaced, did all of that stuff. But that afternoon when I left work, was just going home. It was still in summer. It was in March, so it was still light in the afternoon, so I could drive home. It was about 40-minute drive home from work, and I could go for a surf. So I was like, well, it's been a pretty average day. I'm going to go for a surf just to kind of try and wash that off, because that's what I've always done. Surfing for me has always been my coping strategy. So went to do that, and there wasn't really too much that I can look back on and say, that was a sign to not surf, or to not paddle out, or that I should have gone in sooner. Because it was really just like any other day. And I think that's why it's so incredible when I actually think back at what my first thoughts were. And for a large portion of those first thoughts, there was really nothing. Like when I was actually being bitten by the shark, because that whole sequence of events for me is something that when I look at fight, flight, or freeze, the freeze part of it, which was a majority of that, the actual impact. So I'll actually just run you back a little bit through that part of the story, because I'd been surfing for about 40 minutes, and one of my good friends, Joel, he'd actually come out to surf with me. Someone I'd called on the way home. He's one of my good mates, and told him to come down for a surf. It was only really when he came out that I was having a chat to him. Good thing about surfing, it's a good support network. When you're sitting there waiting for waves, you can actually chat. So that was really helping, try and wash off the day. And Joel had caught a wave down the beach, and I was actually just sitting there trying to reflect on the day and sort of thinking about what had happened. And I was just sitting there, and I was actually looking back at the beach. Sun was, just starting to set behind some clouds. So it was late in the afternoon, and I got hit from my right side really hard by something really powerful. Like, it honestly felt like a bus. And I got thrown off my board, and before I could actually figure out what had happened, I look down and see a shark bite in my leg. And for a lot of people, they do ask, what was your first thought in that moment?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people expect it to be, a 4-letter word of some description or a collection of 4-letter words. But for me, it was shock, and I was just frozen. Fight, flight, or freeze. I just went straight into freeze.
Yes.
Not really knowing what to do. But the incredible thing about that is, like, even my thoughts were frozen. I couldn't really process it that much because I was just trying to actually figure out what was going on in that moment,
yes.
trying to gather information, trying to figure out what to do. And the whole process of actually being bitten by the shark was probably 5 seconds, but for me it slowed down so much. Like when I talk about freeze, it was even time freezing.
Yes.
Like it felt about 5 minutes, and being able to take in all those details was pretty incredible. Like even the feel of the shark's skin, the look in its eyes, the fact that there was no noise, all of these very fine details I can take in, but there were no real thoughts that were going through my head. The first thought I had, when I was able to finally try and get away from the shark was, it was a funny one, actually. It was kind of, I can't believe it's happened here. Like this was just any regular day that I was going through. It wasn't anything special. Like I'd surfed, late in the afternoon my entire life. A lot of people will say, yeah, you probably had it coming when you're surfing that late in the afternoon. I said, well, I've done it for,
lots of people do it after work, right? So
massive. Yeah, that's it. So that for me, it wasn't like, it was a different day. I was like, I can't believe it's happened here of all places. Like I've surfed a lot of places that people would consider sharky. And for me, I was like, it's the beach that I've grown up surfing. And I think that kind of goes back to the fact that it was really just a regular day.
Yes.
That this one event had, jumped out at me in. But I was really lucky in that moment. I mentioned that all of that moment had kind of frozen. The moment I was able to get away from the shark was actually when it separated the large chunk of flesh from me, because I'd tried, initially entered freeze. That wasn't really doing much for me. I tried fight. A lot of people say try and punch a shark. Forget you can't really punch through water. So the only option I had left was flight. So I had to try and pull away from the shark. And the unfortunate thing for us humans is we're pretty fragile creatures. And if a shark has a hold of your leg and you pull away from it, it's going to hold on to that chunk of your leg. And which, it's sorry, my dog's doing a bit of barking at the moment. I'll let him out. Go. Go Sorry about that. So as I did pull away from the shark, it separated that chunk of my leg, but that allowed me to try and swim in. And I mentioned my friend Joel that came down to the beach that afternoon. As I tried to get in as far as I could, the shark actually came back a second time, and I was able to try and stop it before a wave hit us and kind of separated us underwater. But Joel being there when I came up from underwater that second time, seeing him paddling towards me as fast as he could,
he would have been like, holy crap,
exactly. Like one of the luckiest things that I could have had in that moment. The thing that makes that luckier too is Joel's the type of friend that I think a lot of people have a friend like this, where you'll call them to go and do something, they'll either show up really late or not show up at all. And Joel's renowned for this. So the fact that he was actually there is a massive bonus. Exactly. But also the fact that he'd chosen to paddle towards me and to pull me out of the water was something that was more incredible. Like him getting me on his board and taking me, because by that time I'd lost a lot of blood and I was losing a lot of strength. I couldn't even paddle by the time that he was taking me to the beach. I was, going into shock and completely freezing up. So he really saved my life, because he got me back to the beach. He tied the tourniquet, stopped the bleeding. His fiance at the time, Aggie, they're married, so I should just say his wife. She was on the beach as well, and she's an intensive care nurse. She was the person that called the ambulance and was, directing the whole situation. There was actually another nurse that was on the beach that afternoon. So from going from how unlucky I just was to probably the, just lucky thing after lucky thing that fell into place, to eventually, get me in the helicopter and to hospital.
Wow.
All of that stuff was out of my control. Everything that needed to happen happened, even down to the helicopter that came to pick me up. Initially, when they sent the helicopter, they actually sent it to Bondi Beach instead of Bombo Beach, which might seem unlucky, but the helicopter they sent to Bondi Beach had no blood on it. So when they realized that there was nothing happening at Bondi and they needed to send it to Bombo, the one that they sent to Bombo to pick me up had blood on it, and I needed 2 transfusions just on the way to hospital to keep me alive. So
wow, like someone's looking after you big time.
I know. So there's, for me, there's so much to be grateful for there. A lot of people say, you must look at that situation and say how unlucky you were, to be bitten by a shark. And I say, well, yeah, of course. Like when you look at the numbers, odds of being attacked by a shark, 1 in 3.6 million. So like that is unlucky, but for everything after that to go in my favor, I think is incredible. Like it makes it pretty easy to, be grateful for a lot of things in life when you've experienced something like that. And also to kind of know that it must have kind of happened for a reason, that I'm still here in a way is, I think, a really big thing for me. Like when I do reflect on that day. So, I'd always, make sure that I do reflect on that day, and I'm grateful for all the things that did happen to me, because it could have been a very different story.
Yes, that's it. And I suppose not only that, like if you're thinking about it from the divine or on an energetic level, or however you want to look at it, luck or whatever, I guess too, the fact that you, hadn't had a lot of, resilience, or adversity, so to speak, in your life beforehand. If it hadn't have been like that, it would have been so much more tougher for you to get through and then be able to share your journey now, right? And all of that. So yeah, everything just fell into place for you big time, brother. That is so
massively. Yeah, massively. I think each time I share my story, and there's little things that I pick up on each time, like even when I'm sharing it happened to me, I pick up on things every time I tell it, where I'm like, wow, like it's, I can see other people taking interest in it, but even for me, I tell it, I'm like, oh, it's a pretty incredible thing to have happen to you, and to gain that perspective. And for me, another thing that a lot of people ask is, if you had the choice, would you not go surfing that afternoon? I'm like, absolutely not. Like I wouldn't change that.
Yeah.
Like for me, as unlucky it was, and it did take a lot from me as far as physical condition and purpose and identity really at the start.
Yes.
But for all it took away, it gave me a lot more in the long run. And I think when a lot of things do look better in hindsight a lot of the time, but when you do get the opportunity to kind of look in the rearview mirror and you can be grateful for something that is on the face of it so bad, I think it is difficult to have experiences in life like that, and to have one where I do have a good outcome, where I do have so many positives from it, I think is something that it's always going to be a big part of my vision and why I do what I do.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love this so much. This is I'm excited. So obviously we're talking about identity and so forth, and so emotionally, because we can talk about mindset and all of that stuff, but like the whole mind body thing is a really big deal, right? How we're feeling within ourselves and how we handle things emotionally can mess with our health and our recovery, and affect what we're thinking too. So emotionally, how did you deal with that afterwards?
It took, like in the early days, not very well. Like to be completely honest, like when I say all this positive stuff, that's with the benefit of hindsight. Like at the time, like I did feel a little bit like a victim throughout, just the sheer bad luck, and the fact that just my entire world had been flipped on its head. And the news from the doctors, not only being told that I couldn't walk again, which is massive for anyone, but being told that living an active lifestyle, but for me not being able to surf again was something that I always say, like, hospital isn't a great place for a number of reasons. Like, the food sucks, it's cold, but the worst thing about hospital is how lonely it is. Like, especially at night times, when, if you're lucky enough to have support there, they go home and it's just you laying in a bed with your thoughts. And for me, it was those thoughts of all the negatives that really started to take over. And that was my reality for a long time. And you mix that with the fact that, you know, you're on painkillers because you have to be, for the pain that you're dealing with at the time. It doesn't give you the chance to actually have much clarity.
No.
And it's very difficult to actually deal with that. And even simple things like being able to fuel yourself with good food, like hospital food's terrible. Like, I was lucky that I had, you know, a lot of my friends' mums actually sending me food in.
Oh, that's
because if like, and that was, you know, for me, something that I could look forward to. But the hospital experience is definitely not conducive to a positive mental outcome. Like, emotionally, all aspects of my early recovery were quite negative. And it really wasn't until I had you know, a little bit more time to reflect on, you know, what I'd gone through, and when I could start to see and appreciate the support that I was getting, that I was able to look at things a little bit more positively. You know, one of the big things for me was actually, you know, just getting a bit more perspective on my situation, and looking around at other people, you know, in my family, and how it had affected them. You know, like, I look at both my sisters and how it affected them. They were both living away at the time, trying to get back and support me in hospital and see the family, and dealing with the media was a hard thing for them. Even like my mum, she was talking to doctors, doing research. She's not a medical expert, but she felt like a lot of the you know, the outcomes of my surgery would weigh heavily on her shoulders, and putting a lot of, you know, pressure on her. And then even for my dad, who was the one that pointed this out for me, he was telling me his perspective of when he was actually going down to the beach, because they lived about 5 minutes away from Bombo. So they actually got to see me before I was airlifted away. And he was telling me about how he was in, I mean, his background is he's worked in emergency services his whole life. So with fire and rescue. So he's used to being the person in those critical situations where he can jump in and provide the support. But when he got down to the beach that afternoon, he was being like physically restrained and not being able to help or provide the support that he's used to giving. And you know, the words that he said to me that rung so loudly is, he said that I was watching you go the color that people go right before they die, which is, you know, something that he's seen throughout his time in fire and rescue. And for him to actually, you know, open up about that and be vulnerable was something that got me to realize that I couldn't really internalize what I was going through so much. But the biggest thing it did for me was gave me the perspective that it wasn't just affecting me, it was the people around me as well. Exactly. And that wasn't just my family, it was my friends, my housemate, like everyone around me was affected and impacted in one way or another. And even when I look back at the experience, like, I still see people today, it's, you know, 5 years on, and I see people that say, I remember where I was when I heard the news. And for me, that's what brings me the most emotion out of my entire story, is the impact that my story has had on other people. Because I think that's one of the things that I fear the most, is getting that phone call or hearing the news that something bad has happened to someone that you care about. And I think having that perspective for me was something that really helped me try and be a little bit more open with how I was actually feeling. And like we talked about how I handled it emotionally, like what was to come, as far as, like I said, the feeling of loss of purpose, that was something that I didn't really have too much of an outcome for at the moment. A lot of that was still out of my control, but what I could focus on was what was in front of me, which was the people, like the support. And I looked at it very early on and said, you know, I do want to make as much of a go at this recovery as I can. You know, no matter what the doctors say is possible, but I want to really prove to the people who've actually supported me and sent me messages or come and visited me, and kind of do the recovery for them. Like, they were a big part of why I started my recovery and wanted to go to the physio every single day and work so hard, is because I wanted to kind of give something back to those people if I could. And it's not, and it's, I think being able to break it down like that was something that really helped me along, because it kind of made it more of a a person-centered like recovery where, you know, I was talking to people a little bit more, and I was trying to share my goals of recovery with them, which made me accountable, but it made me feel like they were also invested in my recovery as well. So if I was having a bad day or a bad week with my physio, I could actually talk to people about it, because I knew that they had, you know, that they all wanted to see me do better. And that was a big part of the way I looked at the whole recovery. So I think when we talk about, you know, how I handled emotionally, definitely not well at the start, but as I started to gain a bit of perspective, and the biggest thing was, you know, knowing that I wasn't alone in what I was going through was one of the biggest things that really helped me, not only in those earlier days, but as I progressed through the recovery, and even, you know, today is a big part of how I view a lot of things, is knowing that I have people in my life that I can talk to help me through those tough times.
It plays a huge role in healing, doesn't it? Being able to
Massive.
be open and share with people, and you know, because when you do internalize it, any trauma that you've been through, it just gets worse, right? And eventually it's going to come out some way. It's going to, you know, slow down your healing, or it'll affect your mental health, your nervous system. It's just all kinds of things, right? Your immune system. So all those things are just so important when it comes to recovery. So this is really, really good. I like the way this conversation is going. This is
well, I think all of those things that you just mentioned there, like they were all essential for me having a good recovery. Like you said, that link between how you are dealing with things emotionally and how that can actually manifest in your body is, you know, like even down to, you know, like you said, like your nervous system and things like that. I needed everything to be as good as it could be for my recovery if I was to get the best outcome. So I think, you know, when you do look back on it, and it's not really something I've thought about too much, but it was probably one of the key things that really helped me stay, you know, my best self through that whole process.
Yeah. And I think too, it's very, you know, when you're recovering or going, you know, from trauma, or, you know, whatever it is that you're recovering from, it's really easy to beat yourself up and get frustrated with yourself and hate on yourself, right? Because you just, and there will be times, it's natural for anyone going through anything like that to feel like a victim, or it's, you know, it's not fair, or even if it's not a feeling of that, it's like, how am I going to be able to get through this? What, you know, and even feel like the light at the end of the tunnel is a little bit blurry at times, you know what I mean? It doesn't feel close enough. You can't feel what it's going to be like to feel here, to heal, to even envision that in some way, and things like that. There, you know, those times which really make you doubt yourself. And that's when it's so good to be able to like have people that you can share that with, and even know that you've got tools that you can like dip into and go, okay, I know how to be kind to myself today. I know how to be gentle with myself, and how I can inspire myself today to just keep going, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You know, that's massive. And like I said, I think about my recovery a lot, and I think as well being able to talk about it is one of the things that really helps me, not only in the early days, but, you know, as I go through. It's not something that's really going to come up, and I'm not internalizing it even today, because I think it's really important to keep talking about these things. Like, a lot of people get through what they perceive as the struggle, but really it's something that we should be doing every day, not just through adversity. That's the approach we should be taking for our general well-being.
Yes, I agree. And I think, you know, and I know that, you know, especially coaching men, right? You know, for me specifically, there's, you know, a lot of guys, you know, I try to catch guys before shit hits the fan, right? Before they spiral downwards. And, but there are times when it's sort of, when they're starting to spiral downwards, or already started, you know, and they start working with me, but it's because they actually don't realize that that's where they're at until they're there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's because they've bottled stuff up. They haven't had anyone to talk to. They feel like, you know, they don't want anyone to see them in pain. They don't want anyone to see them feeling like they don't have their shit together, that they're not dealing with things, they're not handling things. And so they've got all this stuff inside that they're just not sharing, and they just don't feel like they feel like it's weak to open up about that type of stuff. And not only that, then they'll also go to their mates, right? And their mates are like, "You'll be right, mate." Stuff like that. Or get the hell over it, or everyone goes through hard stuff, mate. Have another beer and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Because they don't even know. I mean, the guys that they're telling stuff to, they don't know how to handle it either, right? They don't know how to respond to it, so that's just like their default thing. So it's not like they're being assholes to them. That's just what they're sort of trained or programmed or whatever it is, to respond to. And so guys just find it really difficult. And I think it's so important to be able to understand and be cool with the emotions that you're having and be able to share, them with others. I'm so stoked for you that all the awesome stuff that happened around that attack that actually helped you, because that obviously is awesome groundwork right from the beginning for recovery, right? But also being able to have that support around you is just incredible. That's mind-blowing. Not a lot of people get to have that much support, and that's really exciting that you have that. It just goes to say a lot about your friends, and your family and the people around you, how much they love and care about you. But also, obviously, when people care about you that much, it means that you've given a lot to them over the years, right? For them to be able to give that much energy back into you. So that says a lot about you and your character.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I think it's you brought up a really good point just a moment ago about how a lot of men deal with these problems in life, and how going to your mates might not always help the situation. But the thing is, so often, like, we only know what we know or what we've been taught, and because so many people haven't been taught how to successfully navigate difficult times, especially as a male, and perceiving it as weak to talk, is something that does self-perpetuate, and then it gets worse and worse. And that's why you talk about that attitude of getting over it is something that often is passed down through generations. Like, a lot of people will look at how their dad dealt with problems, and that's where I look at my story, and I think it's important that conversation I had with my dad was so key. Like, for my dad to actually open up and start talking about his own experience like that and what that meant for him, but the rest of my family, was massive, because my dad's always been my biggest hero. Like, he's not only just in the way that he has gone through life himself, but like in his line of work. Like, I've got photos of him pulling people out of burning buildings in Sydney. Like, he's actually my hero. And for someone like that to be open and to be vulnerable was one of the biggest things for me, being able to say to myself, well, I can do that as well. And really, I think that's what it comes down to, is trying to provide a bit of a positive role model where people can actually say, well, okay, if he can do it, then it should be okay. I had a great message last week from a young kid at a school that I spoke to a little while ago. And he just reached out to me and he said, look, I want to thank you for the talk that you gave us. I actually really needed some of your advice when I went through a tough time recently. Not only just in what he went through, like he said, he had a bit of an injury, and he was like, just, not looking at the injury and trying to focus on your breathing, like practical things like that. He's like, that was really helpful. But he said, just trying to work through the recovery and use some of those things to get through. He's like, that was massively helpful. And you don't know who's going to need that advice when you're actually telling it. But when you get those messages and you're like, okay, well, there's people that obviously benefit from it. You don't know what their personal situations like. The kid might have had an amazing support network and family, but so often we might need someone externally to give us that perspective or that advice to help us through, and to give us those tools to be able to work through as well.
Yes. And you're right. You never know what someone's going through. But I mean, even the most well-equipped people, when it comes to their emotional health, their mental health, and all of that, can go through challenging times, right? And find themselves in a place where they're just going, holy crap, how do I get through this? And because as I said, you can have all those tools and all of that, but if it's something that you haven't been through before, you're going to have that reaction of like, shit, how do I deal with this? This is different for me. I haven't experienced this. I haven't felt like this before. Maybe haven't had these feelings before. If I have, maybe not to this extreme. And then, you know, find yourself feeling a little bit lost and overwhelmed by it. And that's when you've got to ask for help, right? Not
Definitely.
like just go, oh, she'll be right. I'll sort this out myself. I can get through this. Because usually when you do that and you push it back and you don't ask for help, that's when things start, you know, getting a little bit out of hand for yourself. And then it really does take a strain on you emotionally, your nervous system, your immune system, mental health, physically.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, that's a big thing as well. Like I think a lot of people look at someone who seems to have their shit together and, you know, think that, you know, they'll be able to get through anything. And as well, those people often can be the ones where, rather than reaching out to them to help and say, hey, are you doing okay? They're often like, oh no, they've got it. But it doesn't matter who you are. Like, we can all go through things and we can all feel overwhelmed. And like, I think a big part of it is just knowing that. And knowing that, you know, there's so many unknowns, like you can't be expected to know, you know, and the other side of things too is it's never as simple as just like waving a magic wand and you're good. Like even the most resilient people, like it's process, it's time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's knowing, first thing, knowing what to do, but then knowing that it's doing those, you know, consistently, and those incremental benefits will make the difference over time, not just doing something today and it'll be good. Like like even when you do reach out to support, like if you need some help to get through it, it's not just doing it once and saying, okay, that was awesome, I'm going to be sweet now. It's, well, let's check back in a couple of days or a week's time and I'll let you know what's working. Like there's so many things like that where you know, managing that emotional side of your well-being and your mental health is an ongoing process and something that you do for your entire lives, in bad times but also in good.
And I think too, it's being okay with taking baby steps, right? Because, you know, when you're going through situations like that, you just want it to hurry up and get sorted. Like you want it done and dusted, and you just want to get on with your life, or you might want your old self back, right? But the thing is that your old self isn't coming back. I'm sorry. So, like, you know, whatever this experience is, you're going to go through it and there's going to be transformation. So you got to, like, you know, you can either like fight it, or just go, you know what, I'm going to make the best of this situation, and it's going to be challenging. I'm going to have my shitty days. I'm going to have my glorious days. And to be okay with all of it. And because especially when it comes to emotions, I think it can get scary with emotions. People feel like our own emotions can hurt us. Right. And so that's why people fight them so much and don't want to deal with them. When we realize that it's actually okay to be feeling all these things, then we do get the chance to be more gentle on ourselves, but also to be more accepting of the baby steps as well.
Yeah, definitely. The baby steps is key. And even like down to the fact of sometimes you might have to take a step backwards to take steps forwards. Like the smaller increments you can take, like if you need to break it down like that and you need to sometimes do something that might seem like taking a step back or might seem like such an insignificant thing, like the biggest thing is if it helps you move forward in the long run, like that's key. But for a lot of people, you know, we don't like the feeling of stepping back, or you know, for a lot of people it's that feeling of failure for so many people. Like it's not failure, because you know it's the process and being able to work through that. Like you can't really judge yourself on a finished product, because there is never a finished product. Like like you said just before, like when it comes to going through these tough times, like you know they're going to happen. Sometimes they're going to be scary. Sometimes, you know, the new version of you is going to be different, and you know there's a certain amount of, depending on the situation you're in, like being able to evolve and grow like that is a great thing. Like going through, big thing I say, like we can't often grow and become better versions of ourselves without struggle. Like that teaches us so much. And the other thing that teaches us a lot is failing and really taking a look at what we're going through on such a microscopic level and saying, well, this works really well, this doesn't work well, and how can I use these things to actually get the best out of myself moving forward. And it is really all that overall picture, and knowing that it's not just one thing, it's actually the collection of all these things put together that really make who we are.
Yes, I agree. And like, when it came to, what has it helped you realize about yourself? Like, 'cause I know when I experienced brain trauma, and I'm at sort of like the tail end of the recovery of that, and there was at the beginning of that, like, I couldn't walk, I couldn't shower myself, I couldn't do it. It was just, I couldn't talk on the phone, no podcast, couldn't even distract myself. I was just laying in the bed in the dark, just my mind, and I hated every minute of it.
Yeah.
Until I had to be okay with it, right? Because when you're in that place, you learn. When you're going through situations and adversity, it gives you the opportunity to be to understand yourself and how you click a little bit more, so you get that. And along with being understanding with yourself of why you feel the way you feel, and you get to sort of like contemplate, you get to look back at things a little bit, you get to see how you work and operate, and you're then given the opportunity, right, to go, you know what, this is a fresh chance for me to like start over, and to just see where I'm at, to see where I can improve myself, and be able to utilize all that now, along with all the life experience that I've had, and be able to just build from this, create this really amazing, like, in a stance or foundation for myself, so that then I can just power forward, however slow or fast that is, but I get to do that now,
Yeah, that's huge. And like, hearing that bit about your story, it actually, and as you said, like, what have you learned about yourself? For me, one of the most important things I learned about myself was actually something that was introduced by someone who had just been through a brain trauma. It was a couple months into my recovery, and like I was still kind of trying to work out how to actually approach the whole thing. And I was just in town here in Kiama, and I came across a guy who I hadn't known personally for a very long time, but he'd actually reached out and sent me a message of support while I was going through my early recovery. He is a professional surfer who had a brain injury, and same things as a lot of what you described there. Like, he couldn't walk, he couldn't stand on a surfboard, like, and he was number 2 or 3 in the world when this all happened. And I remember talking about it with him, and he was saying how frustrating his whole recovery had been, because it felt like so much of it was out of his control. Like, he was just waiting for his brain to fix the neural pathways. And he said that one of the things that he learned, and he said that, I'll share this with you because you might need it. He said, for me, it's not about comparing yourself to the person you were. So for him, it wasn't about comparing himself of being number 3 in the world. For me, it wasn't about comparing myself to the surfer or the person I was before. He said, look at the person that you were yesterday. And if you can put things in place to be a better version of that person for today, then it's about the progress. It's not about, trying to get back to that old outcome, or trying to reach whatever it is that you think is there. It's just about constant improvement. And that, for me, was one of the big things that helped me through my recovery, because before that, I'd actually been set goals by my physio, which had been to, first of all, was to get back surfing, which for me, I never really thought was a possibility. But the other 2 things I needed, like getting back in the car to regain my independence, and also getting back to work so I could have a livelihood of some description. And I was working at those goals, but the surfing one was one that really always threw me off. Like, I was like, why am I working towards this thing that I'm never going to be able to achieve? But when I had that perspective, and I was like, well, okay, I can look at my situation today. I can go to physio, I can work hard, I can do all the extra bits to try and be that better version of myself. And if I keep doing that, who knows where I'll end up? Like, I might not be able to surf again. And even if I can't surf again, I'm going to be fine with the fact that I've put everything in place to try at least to achieve that. Because for a lot of people, and from my physio, and I can see now why he gave me that goal of surfing, because I actually only looked back recently at the very first message that he sent me while I was in hospital. I hadn't met him before. He sent me a message out of the blue, And he just introduced himself. He was actually friends with Joel, who saved me on the beach that day.
Yes.
He just introduced, said, I went to school with Joel. I'm actually own a physiotherapist in Kiama. And he said, I'll let you know this one thing. He said, when it comes to overcoming something like this, he goes, people often fail not from aiming too high and missing, but from aiming too low and hitting, because you leave so much on the table.
Yes.
And that's why, for me, I understand why he set that goal of surfing, because it didn't matter if I achieved it or not. It's about putting those things in place, regardless of if I could have ever even got on a board again.
Yes.
But for me, it was about, the hard work and that process to try and get there. And that's really where pride is. It's in that process right there, and trying to be the better version of what you were yesterday. And when you break it down like that, and you actually have things every single day that you can try and achieve, like for me, every single day it was going to the physio. Like it was doing things like that that sense of achievement was something that really lifted me up every single day to get me moving in that direction, where eventually I was lucky enough to surf again. I say lucky enough to surf again. Like a lot of that did come from hard work, but I still consider a lot of it luck, especially based on the earlier parts of the outcome. Like the fact that I was able to keep my leg, so many other things around that, even around the operation they did and the muscle transplant. There was a lot of luck there, but it's the combination of luck and hard work and that mindset to be able to get to that point.
And just gone, oh, well, I'm just going to accept that I'm not going to surf again, tell myself that, and just don't even bother. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's something I saw a lot when I was in hospital. Like when I was in hospital, I have no idea why, but I was in hospital for 5 weeks in total, and 1 week was in intensive care, and then the rest was kind of on a general ward. And the people that I spent time with, like the people in the same room as me, were all stroke victims. Like they'd all had strokes, and they were all in their 70s.
Yes.
And for them, the messaging was so different, and the way in which they dealt with what they were going through was so different to what I was kind of trying to go through. Because for them, it was more, well, yeah, look, for you, if you can't, walk, you're struggling to talk, like, this is pretty much it from now on. And like I look at something,
it's all downhill from here type thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I could see them kind of taking that advice and being like, oh, well, I suppose this is it.
Yeah.
And the family as well. And that's so hard to deal with. And I think, as unfortunate as that is to see, like that was for me a pretty big catalyst as well when I look back at that. To say, like, I kind of wish, and I know some of them will. Actually, there was one that lived close by to me here who he actually didn't like the fact that they'd told him that, and he's like, I'm going to be able to walk again and do all these, and he was able to. But often we just take what we're told as what's going to be the final outcome, and that's really what stops a lot of people from actually achieving something better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I know, even for myself, I was given a lot of shitty advice. I mean, doctors, whatever, specialists and all that, they know what they know. That's what they do, right? But I just, they got very frustrated with me, and I got frustrated with them, because I was like, no, fuck you. I'm doing it this way. You know what I mean? Like, there was lots of things where they had given me advice which actually just made it so much worse for me. And I just said no to all of it. And they were very angry with me. One of them got really pissed off with me on the phone, and I just said, I don't care. Like, just slam down the phone. Well, you don't slam down phones. You just
taking the aggression out of it.
That's it, So, and because in my mind, like, because before brain trauma, I was super, super fit. And, and I wanted to get back to that, but I had always been very adrenaline based. I didn't want that back. I wanted to create another version of a new version of myself, where I could, possibly get back to where I was fitness wise and all of that. But I also wanted a more grounded version of myself. And so that was more important to me was creating the really grounded version of myself, and the one where I wasn't so adrenaline based anymore, where that felt beautiful to me. You know what I mean? And I just thought, if I can do that and then still go for those other things and just take the baby steps to get there, I'm friggin' stoked with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was, letting go of who I used to be. It just was such a wonderful feeling, you know what I mean? And really made a big change for me in how I felt about where I was heading, what I was doing and stuff like that, and becoming more accepting of myself. And so I resonate with that so much. And, and even, when I'm coaching my clients, I wish it was like this. Like, I wish this hadn't changed, or I wish this hadn't happened, or something like that. It's not fair. I want things to be, the way they used to be. And I'm going, there's no going back. Like, you just need to accept that, you know what I mean? And understand that, be okay with that, and then go, hell yeah, what possibilities and opportunities can I create for myself now that's just going to create a more epic life for myself, right?
Yeah. That's, I mean, the biggest thing there is how afraid a lot of people are of change, and like me included. Like, for me, that was like through my experience, that's the biggest change that I've ever been through. And like, it's difficult, and without having been through it before, we don't really know how to deal with it. And a lot of people don't see the fact that you do get a chance to do something new, or learn something new, or grow in a different way. And like, it does take time. And that was a big thing for me. Like, once I was able to get back in the water and surf again, like, that was kind of me getting back to the point of where I was before, like, where nothing had really changed in a way. Like, I'd kind of gotten back to a point of normality, but it didn't feel normal to me. Like, for me, it would have made sense for me to try and keep chasing my dream of becoming a professional surfer. But when I actually took a step back and said, well, let's have a look at the situation from a broad view and see what other opportunities are out there. And I started looking at, well, I've got this story now. I've got, these things that I can use to try and help other people. And that kind of formed, the new version of myself. And there's a lot of things, like I always said, like, one of the biggest changes that I realized early on about me, where I realized I was a different person, was the first time I went on a holiday where there was no surf. Like, the first time I went on a holiday and didn't pack surfboards and was 100% all right with it. Because before the attack, I would physically have not been able to do that. Like, if I was going on holidays, I would have to be near an ocean or near somewhere where I can surf. But being able to pack those bags and leave the surfboards at home was something where I was like, wow, this is cool. This is exciting. And for me, it opens up, for me, surfing, that only sticks you to the coastlines. There's so much more I can explore now. And that really excited me. And I was like, well, okay, I can embrace this a lot more than what I was before. And that was once I actually realized that the change had happened really without me knowing it. And being accepting of it and knowing it. And I started actually being able to move more in those directions and be able to take on a lot more. And like, it's not easy at the start. Like, for a lot of people, especially if those changes are something that might be negative. But for some instances, it is just a part of life. But we can always look at things in a different point of view and a different light, and try and find the positives in it. Like, even in the worst situations, like, you talk to some people who have literally no money, but and can be living in poverty, and they can be happier than some people. So, I don't often like to use that example of, things could be better, but you always look at your own situation and try and find the positives in that. Not so much comparing yourself to others, but trying to see the positives. And if one of the positives is that you're evolving as a person, then we can embrace that.
I think it is really, I absolutely agree. I think, we have to, not have to, we can choose to, right, feel open to possibilities and opportunities or not. It's, and the thing is that, like, in every situation that we're in, we can change that in some way, right? There's choices that we can make, and it's, really up to ourselves whether we, make a choice that's going to keep us stuck or go backwards or move us forward, even if it's just a little tiny bit forward. At the end of the day, all those little steps just create tremendous momentum that when we look back, a year from now or whatever, we go, wow, look how far I've come. And I'm so grateful to myself that I had that confidence in myself, but believed in myself enough to do that, and stayed congruent to my word to do that as well.
Yeah. And like that's a really, I think, empowering thing. Like when you look at it like that for a lot of people, and like you said, we have the choice, and a big part of that is to be accountable as well in the choice that you do decide on. Because like a big thing for me, especially since the start of this year, I really sat down and said, well, what actually means a lot to me, and what do I want to achieve, not only this year, but in 5 years, things I want to work towards in my life, and try and set out a bit of a plan to work towards that. And a big thing and a big reason that I actually wanted to work on the documentary of mine was because that's a really good opportunity for me to actually reach more people. Like for me, one of the biggest things was to try and motivate and help people, not only in the mental health space, but also in the overcoming adversity side of things, and a lot of what we are talking about today. And to do just a documentary, to say I want to do that is one thing, but to set sort of a high standard that I want to set, and where I want to see it end up, and a lot of things around that. And even a lot of that comes down to just how I conduct myself on a daily basis. It's not just saying I want to do this thing and that happens in the background. There's so much more to it. And it's a big part of why I'm actually talking to you today, because I made a conscious effort as well that I need to actually be a bit more active in what I put out on social media and stuff like that. And on LinkedIn, where we met, is I've been putting a bit more focus on trying to make more connections and put more things on there about my experience. And it's really interesting how if I wasn't accountable in actually doing those things, we wouldn't be having this chat right now. Like a lot of things wouldn't happen if I didn't make that choice, and if I didn't hold myself accountable to it. Because if I wasn't holding myself accountable, I wouldn't be able to achieve the things I really care about, which are the things I wrote down at the start of the year. So I think there's a lot of really, really cool and important things that you mentioned there that relate a lot to not only my story, but my recent story and what I'm working on now.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you said that, because I was thinking I want to ask him about his documentary. That just said it just as it went through my head. You mentioned the documentary. I was like, yay! And so with that, like what inspired you to do that? Were you having a conversation with someone, or it just sort of like came to you one day? Because I'm so stoked that you're doing a documentary, because it's very easy to like just hear someone's story, right? And like you hear, oh yeah, I went through a whatever it is, an experience, a trauma, a shark attack, but here I am now, and then just see where the person is now, and not actually get to walk along that journey with them and experience that and see like the process that went into that. Because it's all great to see all the awesomeness at the end, but people get very inspired and motivated and touched and moved, and it helps them transform their own lives, being able to like experience and hear about you and the process that you went through and how you were feeling at the time. And these are all things which is why I brought these up today, because I think that is so vital for people when they're seeing things like this or watching a documentary. And so how did that all come about? That's super, super exciting. When I saw that on LinkedIn, I was like, yes.
Yeah, so the documentary itself, it came from actually, I got to give a shout out to my friend Sam Tolhurst, who I hit him up and I said, I want to just put together a little sort of 4-minute clip just to show at the start of when I do my talks, just to give a bit of background and that. And we did the filming for that and kind of put everything together, and we both sat back and watched it, and he looked at me, he was like, there's more to this. Like we can make this so much better and tell so much more of a story. And when he said that, it kind of made me flash back to where I was earlier on through my recovery, where there's this thing that happens when you get I don't know if this is a thing that a lot of people can relate to. But when you get attacked by a shark, right? There's opportunity. Yeah, there's opportunities to sell your story. Like, you can get approached by a current affair, and they'll pay you a sum of money to do a clickbaity type of thing on your story. And I never really wanted to do that because, first of all, it happened early in my recovery, and I was like, my story's not finished. Yeah. Second of all, I wanted to be able to tell my story in a way that made me proud, and a way that kind of allowed more than just the shark attack side of things, because it is so much more. Like, even as we've spoken about today, and I love doing podcasts and interviews like this, where the shark attack's only a small part of it, because it is so much more to it. And as I was talking through things with Sam, we're looking at how we can approach it. That was one of the things we noted. And I was like, there's a lot of things I can tell about my story, which are interesting, but there's also some parts of my story that aren't mine to tell. So I wanted to give a platform to people like Joel and Aggie to tell their perspective of the story, like my parents, my surgeon, my physio, where you can see things from their point of view as well, because my point of view is just from, I want the best outcome for me. And that's pretty clear. And like that's, I can tell my story in so many ways, but it really is, it's me centered. But having those different perspectives is so important when it comes to telling the overall story. And not only that, but a lot of things around it, because we looked at it again and we're like, okay, we've got the story, we want to tell the attack, give Joel and Aggie's perspective, give your mum and dad's. Said, let's talk about the recovery and getting back to the water, and that's a big part of the story as well. And we're like, okay, we can't really just leave it at getting back in the water, because there's more to it than that. So and that was a big thing about my story, is once I did get back in the water, I was like, well, now what? Like, what do I do after I've achieved what's the biggest goal I've achieved in my life up until this point? I had to set new goals for myself. And a question I always find myself asking me personally is, what next? When you achieve what you're working on at the moment, what will you do after that? It's a big story of human potential. And for me, I was introduced to this when my friend actually reached out to me and said, do you want to walk 100 kilometers for the Oxfam? And I was like, that sounds like an incredible thing, A, to give myself a physical test, but B, to also test myself mentally, to hopefully get to that point where I want to give up, but to try and push through it. And that for me was a really big part of doing the Oxfam and saying, well, after that, what next? And the big one that's been sort of on my radar is to do the Molokai paddle. So it's a 52K open ocean paddle between Molokai and Oahu in Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
And it ties things together so perfectly, because it's in the ocean, because it's got the endurance, it's got the mental aspect, but also because as part of my operation, to replace some of the muscle that was lost in my leg, they took my lat muscle from my back to fill that gap and to hopefully give a little bit more strength down there. But the lat muscle is actually one of the most essential muscles to paddling. So to be able to complete the Molokai with only one lat muscle would be a massive achievement for me. And again, just another thing to prove that, we shouldn't be defined by what doctors say we can and can't do, or what people think we can and can't do. So it's kind of got that storytelling element to it as well. And they're the type of things that I like to do for myself as like a bit of a challenge to keep me, moving in the right direction, to keep me, feeling like I am mentally strong and moving in the right direction, but to keep proving to myself that things aren't easy. Like, I keep wanting to find the next task that makes it harder and harder. I committed 2 days ago to running a marathon this October, which I'm really, really excited about. And doing things like this and being able to include them in the film is something where I think it just adds to it, where it's more than just the shark attack. It's because it is so much more. And like the thing I always say is that the shark attack is so unique when it comes to a story to tell, and not many people can resonate with that, but they can resonate with struggle, and they can resonate with doing these difficult things in life, and being able to put everything together like that is something I'm really proud to be able to do. And a big part of it as well, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about having the opportunity to sell my story early on. Now I get the opportunity to tell it how I want to. Like, it makes sense to try and tell it as soon as possible, but for me, it's been over 5 years, and I've accomplished a lot since then. And there's so much more to my story.
Or for ratings on the TV, right? It's not
exactly
a personal journey at all. Where now you get, and not only that, you get to show not only the journey from that to now, but you know what's ahead for you. People can still continue to follow your journey and be inspired by that, and to see what else that you have achieved, because you know, of course, everyone just wants to see you back surfing again, right? But there's, as you said, there is so much more to the story.
There is, and that really does sum up the why with the documentary. Like it is more than just that. There's so much more that I wanted to tell as part of my story. So being able to do that, not only, you know, the storytelling side of things, but myself and Sam are actually producing it ourselves. Sam's an amazing filmmaker, and another thing we wanted to do was to include a lot of really talented people in our local area. So we've actually been keeping it very local as far as people who are involved with the film, and giving a lot of people the opportunity to show what they do, because that's, you know, another thing that I want to help people do, is to really, you know, be the best version of themselves, and being able to do that in our local community is something that I'm really proud to be able to do. So doing all of that it kind of ties things together really well, where I'm not doing it for the money. Like anyone who makes films will know, it's not really anything you can, especially, you know, documentaries. It's, for me, it's not about the money. It's about being able to help people. It's being able to tell the story, and it's
a lot of work that goes
a lot. So I'm really thrilled with the whole process. Like for me, it's been amazing to work on, to learn so much about that. And you know, hopefully, if this goes well, it'll give us an opportunity to start telling other people's stories as well. Documentary filmmaking for Sam in particular is something that he was always really passionate to be able to do, to tell other people's stories. And you know, I couldn't have a better person to actually do that with, as a good mate of mine, someone who's really helped me through my recovery, and you know, to be able to, you know, help him do something that he wants to do so much is a big part of creating that why.
That's exciting. I love it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about it. A lot of people do ask when it's going to be released, and it still is a little way off, because we want to do the paddle. The paddle was actually cancelled this year, so we're hoping to do that. It's mid next year. So if all goes well, the documentary will be released sort of end of 2022. So still a lot of work to do, but it's an amazing process.
Well, the cool thing is it like, what you're doing now, you know, other than building momentum up for it, is also like we get to see, it's a bit like, you know, we've heard about your life journey. We also now get to see unfold the journey of the documentary as well. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's another thing to it, is providing, you know, the backstory into that. Like even down to the fact that I'm doing the interviews myself. So like I interviewed my parents, and I interviewed Joel. Like it's really cool for me to do that, because I get to ask them questions, and I actually found out things that I didn't know before, which is incredible too. So that side of the storytelling within the storytelling is even better. Yeah.
And it would be really, it would be beautiful for them to be able to share how they were feeling and their emotions, and also their own personal journey, right? There's a whole heap of, there's all these different people's journeys in this process that they all get to share theirs, and that's a really beautiful thing. That's so cool.
Yeah. So I'm happy to do that, because that was really important. And the line I always say, that I said before, is it's some parts of the story aren't mine to tell. So I think it's important to give them that platform.
Yes. Yeah. And not only that, it will also help other people that are going through situations like that as well, or their own adversity, you know, like being able to resonate with that, or, you know, maybe they don't understand their family members, or, you know what I mean? There's all this stuff going on. It gives them a little bit of insight, right, into how people are feeling around them. So then they can maybe be more understanding, or family can be more understanding of them, and vice versa, right? You'll get this really beautiful connection flowing. It's good.
Yeah, definitely. Like both sides of the story are really important there. There's actually that was something that was brought to my attention. Another thing that happens when you get bitten by a shark. There's a thing called the Bite Club, which is a support group for people who've been bitten by sharks. It's really awesome to be a part of, except for having to be bitten by a shark to be a part of it. But they have support for the families as well, because they acknowledge that it's not easy for the family to go through it. So yeah, providing that perspective as well is so important, not only just in a shark bite setting, but in anything, like supporting someone through a tough time, or helping someone try and achieve their own goals. Like it's always more than just one person. Like even people who come across as being that lone wolf, there's always people behind them, people that you might not see, but they got to get their inspiration from somewhere. And for a lot of people, it might be from their family members or the people that are close to them that really help them through that.
Yes, that's it. And I guess also for people that don't have that support at all, or just feel like they can't talk to anyone, it's great to have like the Bite Club available. Definitely. Yeah, that's so good. Oh, I'm excited. This is fantastic.
I'm glad.
Well, like keep me updated if you can. That would be fantastic. And we can do like a follow-up on this if you want to, like later on when you get closer to it or whatever, or even if there's something that you feel you want to share that maybe we didn't cover today, like just message me, go, Mandy, we need to do a part 2.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate that. And I think like I said before, I've really appreciated the fact that of the time that we've spent talking, so much of it's been the stuff around the shark attack, and that's something that I really enjoy talking about. Like the shark attack, like I said, it's something I know is what the people want to hear, but the value really is in the other stuff that we've talked about. So more than happy to jump on for episode 2, and also to see how you're going with the updated Mandy and and what you're going through and how you're working through the new version of yourself, because I think that's really exciting too.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much. And so before we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't cover that you would just like so passionately feel that you'd want people to know right now about your journey, or just a lesson, something that you've an insight that you would just love to share?
I don't know. I think for myself, like the biggest learning I had was around what I said before, the thing that relates to, your story and pretty much anyone's stories around trying to be that better version of yourself. Like, and they don't have to come in big leaps. They can come in small increments. Like it's a big thing. Breaking things down, getting help where you need it is one of the most important things when it comes to progression in life. And not only just overcoming tough times, but working through the good times as well is super important. So that's one thing is always have that self-awareness and know where you're at, and know that you can always look at your situation. If you want to improve, if you want to change it, you have the power to do so.
Yes, absolutely. I'm gonna high five. Not many people like high fiving, though. I don't.
Got it. I like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today, Brett. It's just been wonderful chatting to you. And where can people, if they want to find out more updates on the documentary and more about yourself, is there like a website or social media? I mean, I'm connected to you on LinkedIn. I can include that with this, but is there sort of other places where you would really love people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn's been a great platform for connecting with people recently. I really like that. I'm on pretty much anything. If you search my name, Brett Connellan, you'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of that. I think if anyone does want to follow the film, you can actually follow that directly on Instagram. So the film itself is called PYROPHYTIC. Yes. And you can search PYROPHYTIC film on Instagram, and not only giving insights into the story, but some really nice, we're kind of sharing a lot about the filmmaking journey on the way as well. So if anyone's interested in that, but we'll have all the updates on when we expect to have it released and everything around that. But all of that will be on my stuff as well. So anyone who wants to follow my journey, I I welcome anyone. And if anyone has any questions or wants to reach out, I'm an open book and I'm happy to help and chat.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I'm just thrilled to bits that we got to catch up today. And
yeah, me too.
Very fast too. So that was really good. I was like, yes, he's available. This is great.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, at the moment, like I said, with the lockdown, I've been pretty free. So I'm more than happy to make time for podcasts and sharing my story and talking to people like yourself.
That's awesome. Fantastic. All right. Well, big hugs. And
yes,
everyone today for jumping in and sharing with us and Brett's story. This is super, super cool. And Brett, we'll be catching up with you soon for awesomeness.
Great. Thanks so much, Mandy.
Big hugs.
All right. Have a good afternoon.
Yes, you too. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, beautiful man. If you're going through stress, need insight, direction to lighten the load, brother, and support during these challenging times, reach out to me. It's no secret that there are so many men suffering at the moment, amazing men, and they're so keen to get help, but don't know what that looks like. So I've created a 6-week one-to-one resilience coaching package for men with one-to-one coaching calls and support via Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp in between calls to help put yourself back in the driver's seat of life. And there's a strong level of trust that goes hand in hand with walking by someone's side during their challenges and their celebrations too. And that's what I'm here for, brother. So message me and let's find your path to true resilience.